what an honor to be joined by one of the finest filmmakers of contemporary Indian cinema. R Balki, sir, a warm welcome to you on filmeshilmy.com and a huge congratulations on Ghoomer streaming on ZEE5 Global.
A pleasure. Thank you. Thank you.
Now, Balki, sir, over the years, I have watched many of your films and I've observed a few traits that I would love to pick out, and especially in light of Ghoomer as well. Uh, there is a sense of you telling extraordinary stories behind people who are pretty much seemingly ordinary. So, what has helped you to extrapolate this strand in particular in the characters you center the story on?
I think most extraordinary people start by being ordinary. I mean, everybody was ordinary before they became extraordinary, and everybody is ordinary even after they become extraordinary, because there's always something more extraordinary than whatever you do. So I just believe that, I mean, extraordinariness comes with the way you approach a problem or the way you approach a challenge. Like when you're challenged, sometimes you can actually sit and mope, or when you or you can just treat it as an opportunity to innovate, which is what Ghoomer is all about. I have a challenge, but I'm not sitting and moping. And the world comes to my support to push me and innovate.
Mm-hmm. Right. And I think there is, and it's quite ironic how your production house is called Hope Productions, because I think that's definitely a strand that you do have in your films, especially if we look at for example, where you do address physically challenged, even cerebrally challenged, character, and obviously here in Ghoomer, she's also physically challenged again in the arm. So, what really drives you to sort of pick out these sort of physical challenges in the characters? Is it something that you've perhaps experienced in your actual life, something that you've observed that's really had a really lasting effect on you?
Not at all. I don't choose subjects except for Pa and Ghoomer. I don't think my characters are either physically challenged or anyway. We're all challenged human beings. Like in Padman, a person was challenged to create an innovative sanitary napkin. Like in Chup, a person was challenged how to kind of deal with the angst of criticism. So I just believe there is a challenge in every way. The stories are all about how characters respond to challenges. Uh, even a film like Chini Kam is a challenge. Like, yeah, I fall in love with a young woman. So how do you deal with it? How do you, how does the story unfold? And it depends completely on how two characters deal with it. So I'm always interested in about a story where characters can be as I wish they were rather than the way they are in real life. So a lot of times when you post the challenge, people don't always automatically behave the way they do, where you want them to do. Cinema is an opportunity where you can create a situation which seems like from very, very real life, but the response to the situation can be something that you dream of, or you want to see, or you want to that always been my wish. My wish has always been to portray a scene on screen that I wish would happen. And that's always been what my thought process was.
And it's quite ironic as well that you've chose Ghoomer because obviously for Saiyami, she's obviously very much into her sports. In fact, I had interviewed her and you had actually discovered her while she was playing sports, right? I think that was one of the stories that she had picked up on. And you yourself are quite an aficionado of cricket. You love cricket as well as your passion for cinema. So it almost seems like this story has been perhaps with you for a long time. Am I correct in that assessment?
No, it's not a story that's been with me for a long time. It actually was a film that I decided to do when I met Saiyami, because a film like this can't be imagined with just another actor. There are very few actors who are great sportsmen and great actors. Saiyami is one of them. And she's possibly the only one here in this country. So therefore, to meet a girl like this and to have a theme like this requires extraordinary commitment, dedication, knowledge of the game, passion for the game. And to pull it off authentically, you need to be a proper cricketer. And that was what Saiyami was. To me, she was the inspiration behind Ghoomer.
Right. And I think I also really admire, like I said to you about hope, in the theme of hope in your films. And quite often when I watch your films, yours and Rajkumar Hirani's movies actually, I find it really gives us that flavor of Rishikesh Mukherjee style of cinema. The sort of joy, the sort of family oriented stories. I mean, perhaps perhaps not chup in that sense, but there is a sense of warmth that I feel from your films and second chances in life. Uh, how much of an inspiration, if at all, by the way, has Rishikesh Mukherjee been in your uh, sort of vision as a director and as a storyteller?
Not inspiration. I've been a huge fan of his films. I don't think you can be inspired by a person whose stories come from the heart, whose tonality is his very own. Uh, Everyone has to search for what is their own tonality. And I think we all are trying to do stories with normal people, or like you said, ordinary people. But it depends on how you approach the ordinary people's lives and what is the twist that you kind of give it each time. And your tone of voice, I think that where we all are different is in our tone of voice. We have different pitches and tones of voice.
Hmm. And I think the fact that you have roots in advertisement, and I think that is such a it's such a tough medium actually because you have a short amount of time. I mean, there's so many factors at play. You're trying to endorse a product, trying to showcase a product, but at the same time, you're trying to also do it through a story, and that too in a very short span of time. Um, I think that for you or for any filmmaker, I'm sure. I mean, I would love to hear your opinion on that. Do you think that's really strengthened your skill set and your uh confidence in actually telling more stories effectively on a in a feature length feature?
Well, of course, I learned the art and the craft of filmmaking from. I didn't go to film school, so therefore I learned the craft of filmmaking by doing thousands of ads. Each of the ads, the number of ads that I've edited myself, I've sat with so many filmmakers, because I come from the agency. I'm the writer, so I just go and actually help get a lot of other people to shoot my films. But I finally post produce. I do a lot of editing on my film because I'm answerable to a client over and above the film, about their product. So
Yeah.
I think that teaches you a lot of discipline. What it really teaches you is almost like communication. There is no better teaching of how to communicate in the shortest possible way, in the simplest possible way, than advertising. Because it's almost like you got a creative side and you got an algorithm side. I always call advertising half algorithmic and half lateral, because algorithms are all about, when you're writing an algorithm, it's about, I can't say just give me that lighter. I'll have to say, please extend your right hand, pick that lighter, pick that yellow looking thing out there, lift it, stretch your hand by 2 inches, put it out there. That's communication to a person who doesn't understand the words. So I think a lot of shots, when we as filmmakers kind of design it, whatever we put together has to communicate to people. But the language may be different, but the communication is the same.
Sure. And I think one thing about Ghoomer, which I really loved, and I picked that up after watching the film, is the fact that it really subtly addresses, societal, marginalized societal figures, which perhaps would not have got that prominence before in Hindi cinema, but now they are. Like, for example, the transgender character that, sort of looks after Abhishek and sort of, is sort of being a really good friend to him in the film. I really love the way you also address the fragility of that male character specifically. And I spoke to Abhishek about this, and he often gave his reference of his father's films about how we've actually seen male fragility and all of that evolve over time. I would like to know your sort of perspective on actually casting a transgender character and actually portraying that character in such a beautiful way, which gives them their voice, but without necessarily sort of being, stereotypical about it, and then also about embracing vulnerability through your male characters as well. I would love to know your perspective on these two things.
So when I was writing the film, it was quite clear, because when you're being unsympathetic, when you're saying a person who's lost her right arm, and you're saying no big deal, move on, then there must be no big deal made out of anything else. If you're making no big deal about the crux of the story, then what's the big deal about? Okay, it's fine. Your house help is a transgender. Fine, you help to have a sex change. So what's the big deal? He's another human being. Everybody's a human being out here. So I just believe that we make a big deal out of a lot of things which are pretty normal. But since we have nothing else to talk about, we make a big deal about a lot of things. So therefore, I just believe normalcy is intrinsic. Sometimes we lose the beauty of it through making it abnormal. So I prefer to see things as they are from that person's point of view, which is quite normal. Every transgender feels he or she is normal. I mean, so what's the big deal?
Mm,
So that's the
absolutely.
way you look at it, from their point of view rather than from yours.
Sure, sure. And what about the male fragility part? Again, the
Both,
embracing that part, I think it's so important.
I think the fragility part of it is so again intrinsic. We have these hypotheses that males have to be so strong, understated, have to kind of contain a lot of emotions, shouldn't kind of always seem to be strong. No, I don't think so. We're just as human as women, and women are as human as men. So I just feel there is again. It's looking at people as people and not about what their sex is.
Sure, absolutely. Very well said. And I think also another thing that I have noticed, and I don't know, maybe I'm just extrapolating a bit more from your films, but there is a sense of duality in your characters, like I found, like for example in Genie Come, where there'll be someone who perhaps is, you know, uh, who's a very strict professional, but then obviously he meets someone who's quite younger, who in a way is quite lonely in his life, but then he meets a woman who makes him also feel good, and they feel that rapport with each other. Then, of course, in Pa, you have the physically challenged child and that really strong single mother who really looks after him and cherishes him and nurtures him. And then, obviously, in Chup, you had Guru Dutt in a way, even though he wasn't seen in the film, but he was also like a guiding star to Dulquer Salman. Of course, I mean, he was twisted in the character was twisted, but that's a different thing. And here, of course, you've got Abhishek and Sayami. So it's quite interesting how you almost have this very distinct guru shishya sort of characters in your films. Again, would you say that there has been someone in your life that has really guided you, and that's perhaps translated into you creating these characters on screen as well?
No, I come from the very simple point of that people need people. I mean, you can't live alone. I mean, you can be a very strong, understated, don't need anybody kind of a person. But even your don't need anybody character comes alive only when with another person. I mean, if you don't need anybody and you're alone and you don't see anybody, nobody sees you, then you're not a character. So you need interactions with society of whatever nature. We can't define interaction with society has to be a certain way, but you are interacting with people. People make you, give you a color, give you the color of your character. Whether it could be somebody you fall in love with to compensate for something else in your life, or whether you kind of somebody you coach, or whether it's somebody you kill, or whether it's somebody you feel deeply for, whatever. So we all have people who we look up to. We all have people we want, to improve us. We all have people who we are fragile with, we are vulnerable with. So we all have somebody or the other who we have some relationship with. My thing is about you don't need 20 people like that. Even if you have one or two or three people. In fact, my Ghoomer is possibly the only film where the character has a lot of support. Like there's a family support, there is a coach support, there is even the coach's help support, there is a whole country support. Sometimes you don't need an antagonist. Destiny can be your biggest enemy in the world. You don't need human enemies to kind of have a character. So I just believe I've always believed in that. My characters have never come out of some certain plotting. It's just the way they are. The way I sometimes see a particular character, it's just the way they are.
Sure. And again, I know you mentioned again not about gender or age per se, but I think it's definitely worth pointing out that I think also the sort of voice you provide for perhaps senior citizens is also something which I quite admire and love seeing in your films. For example, like in Pa, you had Arundhati Nag, who plays Amitabh Bachchan's grandmother, essentially. In Chini Kam, you had Zora Sehgal. So you have these strong maternal forces. Of course, in Ghoomer, you had a phenomenal performance by Shabana Azmi, who was this very supportive grandmother who also was very passionate about the sport and was really, doting of her grandchild and motivating her to do and get up and do stuff. Again, where do these maternal forces, do you think that's the sort of rapport perhaps you've had as well in your life and that's really
Yeah,
motivated you to create
I've
films?
always loved my grandfather. I've loved my grandparents, and I always look up to uh, people who are older than me. I'm very fond of them because, firstly, I find them a lot more interesting. They've lived life. They've got a sense of humor. They're not making a big deal out of anything, and they're people who actually are unsympathetic in nature. And they're not the traditional people who say, "Oh my God, poor thing," and I help you, like you believe older people should be. No, the best old people are those who laugh at your issues and say, "Come on, now we can do this kind of thing." And they're living examples of that. And they've got a nice, lovely take on life because they've seen it. I mean, who do you want to be friends with? People who've seen life or people who are yet to see life? I'd rather be friends with people who've seen life.
In life. Yeah. No, absolutely. Okay, right. So we're running out of time. So I've only got like one last question, but I'm going to divide it into two because they're quite interesting questions. I'd love to know. So number one is the fact that even though I feel like R Balki now himself has his own genre of cinema. I think that's definitely something which we have seen. But you have also, as a filmmaker personally, you've explored the thriller side, you've explored the romance, you've explored drama, and now you've explored sports. What type of a space would you like to visit next as a director? And number two, the fact that we're seeing Hindi cinema bounce back exponentially, and I'm so happy to finally see this. What impact or what effect do you feel hope as a theme is in today's climate in driving a film success at the box office? So those are the two big questions.
Uh,
Sorry.
I don't know what genre of cinema I'm going to explore. I don't look at genres. I look at stories. And if I have an interesting story and leads to a action genre, so be it. If it's an interesting story, leads to a thriller format, so be it. I have no idea. It depends on the story that I kind of choose. Like Chup, I never wanted to do a dark film. I just said this is a story and this requires this kind of treatment in life. But another thing is, I don't believe that I don't know what the box office rules are. I don't believe Hindi cinema has bounced back or anything of that sort. A few films have bounced back. Few films have done well. It does not mean cinema is all films that used to do well before are doing well today. No, it's not. Yes, there are fewer people coming to the theaters, except for those few big films. You cannot equate Hindi cinema bouncing back with a Shah Rukh Khan film. They're two different things. That's a very different kind of experience versus a cinematic experience of a very different kind. So there are all kinds of films. So I'm not really sure we're bouncing back in the theaters as it should be. So I don't know what box office depends a lot on, actually, strangely enough, the time that you release a film. And sometimes when the conversation is all about the big event stuff, oh, Shah Rukh Khan film's coming, oh, this Salman Khan, there are about 4 or 5 people's films which are still kind of like events, not cinema. And then when you release it during that point in time, it gets lost. But when it comes at a time when there's nothing else for people to see and they want to just go and discover a good film, it does work even now. So it's always, box office is a lot about what is the audience's mood at that point in time? What are they looking for? Are they just open to kind of going and experimenting? Most times they're too busy consuming content of much different ways. So you don't have space to kind of go and try something else out. Like if there are 5 big restaurants which are kind of, giving you all the food that you love, and there's a new restaurant that opens up, you're basically saying, why would I try that? I'm going to go try one of these 5 stuff. But when all the other restaurants are shut, they're not working, and there are 2, 3 guys who tried out new restaurants, you run to them and say, hey, let me check this out. It's like that.
Quite a gamble, isn't it? Like you just never know what's going to work with the audience.
It's not a gamble. There is a bit of science to it. Yes, but there is a bit of sureness about it. Yes, there's a lot of gamble about it, but even the luck requires a certain amount of planned stuff for the luck to happen. Sometimes the luck does not happen even if you plan it right. If you get the date wrong, nobody's interested in you. But if you don't get the date, if you get the date right, and if you get your content absolutely right, then the chances are it's not so much of a gamble.
Okay. Wow. Well, on that note, wanted to once again thank you, R Balki sir, for joining me on Mission.com. It's so wonderful to have this chat with you, and wishing you all the very best for Ghoomer streaming on ZEE5 Global.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.